All right, so probably I can just start off with the introduction. I'm sure the class just before you broke for lunch was a gist of the wastewater aspects for AMR, right? Because in our introduction class, what we had was the entire capsule, the entire matrix of environmental compartments. But from now onwards, we'll just, since it was introduced to you, the wastewater, we'll look at what are the various treatment options we've got. So, for the treatment, we should know, like, even for us, when we fall sick, we go to a doc. So, for him or her to prescribe a medication, we should be able to tell what our symptoms are, right? So, we will not be just generically be given any medication. So, similarly, for us to treat, do we need to know something before the treatment? So, what kind of data would we want? What do you think? What kind of data would we be looking for before deciding what could be the apt treatment? What do you think? Baseline data such as
Onions actually on stone.
right.
Years.
Okay, so if we retrace it this way, in this whole course, our intent is to treat the water and wastewater. So our assumption is that both these components are contaminated with either antibiotics or it could be ARBs or ARG. So one of the said contamination is there. Having said that, now the next point is how to do about with the treatment. So for that, what kind of data we need for treatment? Example, if you have a lot of suspended impurities in water, let's say there's a lot of silt and dust and sand particles like that, what kind of a treatment option do we usually go for? Sedimentation. Yes. So why? Because the kind of nature of pollutant was such that immediately all of you said sedimentation, right? So for just like my earlier analogy here also, for us to prescribe a definite treatment option, we should be knowing the nature of pollutant that is. And so we have these three pollutants. Are these suspended like silt or sand particles? No, right? So today's class will see what the nature is. Based on the nature of pollutants, what are the options we've got? All right, so in the whole lecture outline, we'll be looking at an overview of water wastewater treatment. We'll then dive into the high-tech or advanced treatment options which are present. And then we will look at what are the nature-based strategies which are available for treatment. Because as I said before also, for treating anything, I can go for the most fancy treatment or I could go for the, very frugal or very cost-effective treatment. So I think this picture representation was already shown to you before. So this is our stream from where we're getting the water. From here, so this is a source. So we can have three types of sources. It could be a surface or reservoir source. It could be underground source, or it could be directly the surface water which we are tapping from here. It is being treated in the water treatment plant. Then after utility, it then escapes as wastewater. I could have a provision of clubbing the wastewater with a storm sewage, and then I can go for a combined sewer system wherein that particular sewage needs to be treated. So we call it as a wastewater treatment plant. So today's class will be looking at both the unit operation which we place here in the water treatment or in the wastewater treatment plant. All right. Now, before we dig into the main treatment options, I wanted to show what the conventional methods available to us are. And if of conventional means as on date, so these are something which has come recently, right? Antibiotics or priority pollutants or these kind of pollutants were not an issue, let's say 50 years back. So let's say what are the options available and how we can build on that if we can or we cannot. So treatment, obviously water treatment, it involves a series of steps that is, and it could be physical, chemical or biological options we could have. The nature of water, if you see for both groundwater and surface water, is very different. If you carefully look here, for groundwater, these are typically having low pathogens when compared to a surface water stream because of the nature. It it passes through a large terrain. All right. So in that pathogens itself, I'm talking about more of, it's in a holistic view, the entire bacteria. I'm not yet into the ARBs yet. Then, if you look at the organic contaminants, it is more so for a surface water stream when compared to groundwater. Groundwater might have, higher amounts of dissolved iron, manganese, so such dissolved metallic impurities could be there, which is usually not seen for surface water. And colloidal particles are more common here in a surface water stream when compared to groundwater. Right? Based on these nature of nature of the pollutants present, we have a schematic representation, a generalized schematic representation for treatment of water. So this I'm talking about drinking water. So I'm first looking into the dug wells or the underground, or the tube wells. So usually we'll have a first step, aeration step. Why? Because when you have something underground, if you have, so chances are the dissolved oxygen would be very less. It's not in direct contact with the atmospheric air. So the dissolved oxygen would be less. That means if there are presence of any sulfates and all that, which is present in most of the waters, so there's always a risk that sulfate would get converted into H2S, which causing, odoriferous compounds. You also have a lot of volatile organic compounds. It could escape and be present in the underground, water. So for dealing with volatiles, that is VOCs, for dealing with, this foul smell or the H2S and ammonia, etc., and for dealing with the dissolved iron, manganese, a simple cost-effective method is to have an aeration. Okay, how things work for iron and manganese is simply they would go ahead and get oxidized, and then it precipitates in an hydroxide form. So if there is iron, it will it will change into iron hydroxide and it will get precipitated. We can remove. So it's a very simple method. I'm not using a fancy membrane technique, etc. Then if you go stepwise, we have a softening method because usually underground water is hard water. So we have, this is a typical, I'm not going into details of this. Then for removing any suspended impurities, we go for a primary settling tank or a sedimentation tank. Recarbonation is usually done for underground water to, to adjust the pH and alkalinity. And then filtration. See, whenever you have something in which we have a precipitant, like here we have a softening flocculant is added. That means chances are the treated effluent will definitely have some suspended impurities. So whenever we have such upstream operations, always it will be followed by a filtration mechanism. And for water treatment, be it surface or groundwater, you'll always see a filter assembly there. All right. And the last unit always for water treatment is disinfection. We cannot go for any water distribution network without having a dedicated disinfection method. Okay. Similarly, if you see for surface water, it looks a bit different. There is no aeration tank and all here. Again, that's because of the nature of the water. Here you will be finding a lot of floating impurities. There will be like, barks, trees, floating plastics and all such things. So it makes sense to have a screening followed by a primary settling tank, followed by if you have any components which are not easily settling by a primary sedimentation. Right? So precisely what I mean is if we have any colloidal particles, which usually happens for river water, etc. So when it comes to colloidal particles, it is very, very challenging to allow it to settle in a primary settling tank. All right. So and if you give it enough detention time, let's say if we give it 24 hours detention time, chances are it might settle down, but we don't have that luxury. So then what we do is we add a coagulant and allow coagulation flocculation, and then you would go for a coagulant aided sedimentation. Right? Rest of the things are pretty much the same because once you have a coagulant or any of those things, it follows. We'll definitely have a filtration assembly followed by disinfection should always be there. Okay. So this is the, as on date, the treatment scheme which we have. All right. And this is for the water treatment. Things look very different when it comes to wastewater because wastewater is not as simple as this. We have an additional complexity. Usually you have what is called as a lot of organics. which is not there in drinking water. So for me, this is one of my favorite slides. I usually use this. Why? Because for wastewater, like I was saying, when you go to a doctor and you give the, symptoms, similarly here, very easily or nicely, if I want to put all my pollutants, I can actually categorize them just into these 4 categories. Like 2 of the classification is my pollutant soluble or insoluble? Okay. If it is soluble, that means I'm calling it as a dissolved pollutant. My life is a bit more difficult when compared to an insoluble, because then it itself, being the nature it is, it will settle down, it will make our lives easy. So I have these 2 options. The second segregation is based on whether it is an organic pollutant or inorganic. Alright? So the way we deal with organic pollutants is very different to how we deal with an inorganic. Then once I have these 2, I have 4 different combinations of this, right? Of which, if I were to give an example of a soluble inorganic matter, can you give me an example of a soluble inorganic pollutant? Anyone? From wastewater. It is, heavy metals, very good. Something else? Something which is commonly found, let's say, even in our campus wastewater. It is soluble and it is inorganic. हाँ नहीं और थोड़ा सिंपल we are making it complicated. We're thinking that all that nasty things is there. Suppose nothing. It's just we existing happily in a campus. So what is the associated pollutant?
Sorry.
Nitrogen and phosphorus, which we call nutrients, which actually leads to eutrophication. Simple, like even when we exist here, when you urinate, urea is going to come, it is going to enter into the wastewater. So sewage will definitely municipal sewage without ammonia, right? So that I can categorize under soluble inorganic matter. Soluble organic matter is nothing but all the other organics, and I can't just name 1 or 2. There's like a bunch of it. It's a huge list of organic compounds, okay, from simple to naphthalene or very difficult to degrade polycyclic aromatics, everything would come there. Insoluble inorganic matter, can you name anything? Sand, silt, clay, all that will come. Insoluble organic matter? Insoluble organic matter. It's not that big also. So, so dead carcasses of animals, leaves, it need not be this big. It could be even which you could actually visibly see. Alright. So that's how I like to segregate it. And then, wastewater treatment scheme, to make things very simple, we would want to first remove, logically that's a more logical thing to do, first deal with the simple to remove things. So we are, first removing most of the IIMs, or the insoluble inorganic matter. It's easy to remove the sand and silt and all that. Just on its own, it will settle down. Then we go for the more difficult, that is insoluble, but is more of an organic matter. So most of the insoluble organic matter is taken care in a primary sedimentation tank. Alright? And whatever is left in the earlier also is done there. So now we have the more difficult options in hand, which is nothing but the soluble fraction, both. It is the soluble organic and the soluble inorganic. So you all must be knowing by now that secondary treatment or the biological treatment is something which is specially designed to take care of the organics, or the SOM, which I say. Okay. So if I'm having an activated sludge process or a trickling filter or rotating biological contact, any of those things, even wetland, open aerated lagoons, all that is going to take care of the organic fraction. Now, with that in mind, these are the various options we have as on date. Alright, so we have physical processes, chemical, biological unit process. In biological unit process, typically it is meant, as I said, removal of organic. So here, organic matter is a substrate for the bacterium. And I'm showing an example here of aerobic method. So we are going to add oxygen in it, and the end products which I get is carbon dioxide and water. So they are happy, we are happy. Why are the bacteria happy? They are happy because their food is the organic compounds And for us, the waste or the pollutant is organic compound. So it goes to both of our advantage. Right? And this is how the whole scheme of thing looks, with a preliminary, with a primary, and a secondary treatment. Right. Having said that, now let's come into our problem in hand, which is which are components which are associated with antimicrobial resistance. Now the challenge here is conventional wastewater treatment plants are not designed for removal of VRB or ARGs. Right? Because when we designed this long back, even this is something of recent origin, we didn't even know that such a problem might occur down the line, 100 years down the line. So the whole design aspect never took into consideration these things. And the conventional wastewater treatments are low cost, but the problem is they are definitely not meant for, or they are not able to tackle the ARB and ARGs. So that's the main issue we have. So to go around this problem, there are advanced technologies available, and there are some nature-based solutions available to us. Now, advanced technologies, they are able to considerably remove the removal of ARB and ARGs. So I'm saying considerable. It's not that they're completely designed or to tackle a particular genes, nothing like that. But when compared to our conventional methods, this is a better option. However, that comes with a cost. So it will be much expensive when compared to the conventional methods. Now, when I'm talking about the components which bring about AMR or ARGs and ARBs, what are the components that I want to? So for me to treat this kind of a wastewater, what would I be looking? Like when I wanted to treat my wastewater, I was looking at BOD as an indicator. Okay, so if my incoming BOD is 1000, I would want to make it, the effluent should be less than 30 so that it can be disposed of. So I have a set of standards. Here we don't, that's another issue. But even if we want to check, and if I want to say that the percentage efficiency of this treatment, I want to put a figure. All right, it's 50%, 90%, 80%. What am I looking at so that I can give a quantity? Any idea? ARGs, anything else? ARGs means I'm looking at genes, right? So is there just one gene, or am I looking at multiple genes? Multiple genes, so whole resistome, right? Yeah, good. So nice to hear you people. It's not, yeah. So we have the, you people missed out on the antibiotic resistance bacteria also. Genes comes later. First we would want to, so there are bacteria which are present only in cases when there is lysis or there is, killing or by some mechanism. See, and also these genes which are present, it could either be intracellular genes or it could be extracellular. It could be, it could be something which is inside and later extruded outside, because they do have very good transport mechanism. All right? So we really still don't know. It's quite in the nascent stage, we don't know. But when I'm talking about genes, even more simplistic thing for me would be to first check for ARBs. Right? So there are ARBs, there are ARGs. Then there are the mobile genetic units, which I was saying, which is even more, a tad bit more complicated, because within the genetic system itself, we are looking at transposons and other such elements. And any other residual antibiotics, you forgot about that. Because if I'm having the pharmaceutical wastewater, which is having huge amounts of antibiotics, even our wastewater, only when you have such alarming amount of antibiotics do we have proliferation of these kind of components, because this is their resistant mechanism. All right. So we could even go for treatment in that. So because we are dealing with AMR and we've been talking so much about the bacteria and all, but the very first introduction class when I asked you, you all said you were talking in terms of antibiotics. Now the whole thing has shifted and we're talking more in terms of the genes and bacteria and all. It's good to know that there's an evolution, but we shouldn't forget the cost for that thing also. So what are the various options we've got in hand? So clearly, like a simple activated sludge process and all is just not designed. It will not do anything for removal of ARG, ARBs or any of those things. So we have a couple of options. They come under all the categories. So we have physical, chemical, physicochemical, and biological methods. However, they're not that, the conventional methods. So when I want to kill a bacteria, what would you want? So what kind of treatment option would you do so that you can assure that there is killing? Should we? Photolytic. Okay. So are we doing any such treatment in our water treatment? Like earlier yes, we are. So earlier when disinfection, correct. In the whole disinfection unit, our idea was maximum kill by giving a disinfectant. Here also it's not though there it is all the bugs. Here we are specifically trying to segregate and then saying that these who are resistant you need to try. Okay, but you cannot do such partiality, it doesn't happen in nature. So again, we are looking at killing most of them, right? Because there are out there about, let's say, hundreds of bacteria, of which maybe 400 of them are ARVs. Others are there, they may not, they are susceptible, they are not yet resistant, but they are out there. All right. So we should be looking at things, hooks or crooks by which we would want to kill or disinfect these things. So a method like sedimentation tank and all definitely will not work. All right. So if you say here closely, under the physical methods, it's given that we have a membrane separation option. Why do you think a membrane separation might work? When I'm talking about membranes, these are having so these are semi-permeable membranes, and based on their pore size and the selectivity, we segregate them. So, okay, we will see all this in detail as we go along today. Chemical methods, if you see again, you see you're looking at chlorine again here, which is a sort of disinfection. Okay. So if you see here, there is a lot of similarity between what we were trying to do there and here. And so if you want to design so this is it's actually a very upcoming and evolving field. So we really do not have out there a treatment mechanism which is capable of, dealing with a plethora of these pollutants. So if you know the logic and how it is evolving, probably you can yourself make a much smarter treatment technology. All right. When I'm looking at the chemical methods, see ozone, chlorine, phenton, all these are components which release a lot of peroxide molecules. These are advanced oxidation methods. All right. And then when we look at physicochemical methods, you have UV radiation. UV is classically meant for killing bacteria, right? You have very good sunlight and you keep your clothes and all out to dry. It is meant for disinfection. Similarly, last one, the biological method, it is not the classical biological method using bacteria, wherein, the organic matter is taken and, those kind of things. If you see here, there's a catch. We'll see how those things change. Pretty much as on date, these are the things which people work on. Different combinations of this. All right. So there are people who are trying, hybrid mechanism. So they would want to, use a chemical-based Fenton mechanism followed by UV, or they might have, different combinations of this. The final intent, most of the cases happens to be the cost. Because believe me, we're talking about treatment of wastewater. Who will want to, who would want to invest a very fancy treatment for treatment of wastewater? Even me, if I am part of a big business tycoon, I'll think hundreds of times. No. So obviously you would want to have something like an ASP process. It's so simple to operate, cheap, and I'm getting a efficiency of like 90 to 92%, which is beautiful. So something like that is still evolving, not there yet. Okay. So let's see. So yeah, why I call all these mechanisms, especially these coming in the second box under the chemical methods, are it releases a lot of free radicals, which are super oxidizing. All right. So these are energetically very high. They are evolving out a lot of free radicals. And what we have, so it's just not one process. Even Fenton's process it's a combination of ferrous iron with, when you combine it with hydrogen peroxide, when that whole reaction goes to proceed, you will see that there's a lot of free radicals oxygen free radicals being evolved out. These ROS are involved in killing and disinfecting and all that. So what is happening is, from any of these sources, people are trying. So you have photocatalysis also. By any of these means, this circle here is an integrated cell of the ARB. Okay, this is nothing but the ARB ka one cell. And what is lying inside happily is possibly the ARG. Okay, so that resistant gene which is happily harboring within this cell. Alright, that's why I'm saying it's easier, relatively easy to kill a bacteria or disinfect. But once it is killed, once there is lysis, once it shrivels and dies, you have this genes, it is still intact. It just goes into the environment. Alright, so that's the complication which we have on it. So you might get very good removal of most of the resistant bacteria. So you'll see that their kill percentage is high and, all that will work wonderfully. But we are not yet sure if the same is applicable for the genes also. Alright. So yeah, let's take one of these processes at a time. So we are having ozonation as an option. This is widely applicable for disinfection. You all know ozone, chlorine, peroxide. So these are some of the potassium permanganate. These are some of the classically used even for disinfection, water disinfection. So and for oxidation of trace organic compounds, where simultaneously hydroxyl radical reaction might take place. Okay, and full-scale ozone treatment of wastewater results in limited inactivation of ARB. Again, ozone, very good. For what? For killing the bacteria. But there is very less, hardly any activity actually happening to denature the genes there. Okay. For cultivable, so these are some examples here. These are from recent studies that, when tetracycline resistant one of these bug E. coli was found, and you saw that the log units of CFU per ml would give you the viable cell. CFU is colony forming units. So if you get sample of water and you're going to check the OD, optical density. So usually people go for OD calculation. You might come with a value, let's say 0.9 is the OD at 600 nanometer. Alright. But that OD will actually have both viable and dead cells. Right? Even if the bacteria is dead, it will show as suspension. It will come in your sample. But if you're doing a CFU experiment in which you're looking at colony forming units, only the living or viable cells will grow. Okay, so that's the reason many a times when you want to actually look at real-time kill what's happening to the number, you would go for a CFU experiment by simply you plate it in a Petri plate and you go about it. So if you say here, as we are increasing the ozone dose from 3 to 5 to 7, you see that corresponding log units of these resistant E. coli, they're also, these many log units CFU per ml could be achieved using an elevated ozone dosage, okay, in a laboratory scale. Similarly, several studies reported damage of cell membrane during ozonation. Now, when there is damage of the cell membrane, in that case, those intact DNA that I'm talking about, they will disintegrate or they will as such come into the open environment. So, whenever I'm having a denaturing, associated release of ARGs is always present. I've already put here. So, here, this has limited inactivation of ARB, limited, but this is hardly doing anything for ARGs. Okay, all right. And so only very high ozone dosages resulted in some removal of genes. So if you go for very high, the whole way in how ozonation works is we got to give pure oxygen. In an ozonator, we actually pump pure oxygen and that gets converted into ozone. So all said and done, this is a very expensive process. All right. So you would not want to do something like that very high dosages of ozone to tackle the genes. It's not a very smart move. Alright. Plus ozone, there's one more problem. It's usually not advisable is that you go for ozonation for a long time, for a high dosage, it will bring about, so if there are any organic compounds, even your pharmaceutical products are organic products, right? They will form, so they won't be intact like that. They will disintegrate, they will make several metabolic byproducts, and most of the times the metabolic byproducts are much more toxic than antibiotics. See, as of now, it's just penicillin there in the water and I'm drinking. When I'm doing an ozonation, sometimes this penicillin will break down and will form some other byproducts. If I drink that byproducts, probably immediately I might be dead and gone. Alright? So whenever we do ozonation, we always want to see on a time scale, like throughout the, on a rate calculation, we would check what are the associated types of byproducts we form. So that is one of the disadvantage. We could probably go for this if it is giving us good results of ARB. The ARB, it's not that great. Alright? So that's about ozonation. Now, when we look at chlorination, we know classically it is used for disinfection. It's been used, in the range of 5 to 10 ppm with about a contact time of 30 minutes is what is classically being done in water disinfection. Again, here, not efficient in removal of ARBs. As the dosages, more than 2.5 milligrams per liter, the removal efficiency of ARB was incomplete and a regrowth of ARB was observed. Okay. Alright, so it is not even capable of handling the ARBs. It might be, those chlorination might be good at handling our regular pathogens in the water distribution system. These are also bacteria, but then these are like some evolved form. Okay. So they are like superbugs kind of thing. So for tackling them, it's not that efficient as on date. So these sulfadioxine and erythromycin resistant bacteria were not eliminated until the chlorine exposure was increased to about 60 to 150 milligrams of chlorine per minute. So we just see the dosage from 5 to 10, we're enhancing it like so many times. Now, when you have such high doses of chlorine, can you think of any other disadvantage? Suppose I have all the money, I am this business tycoon, and I do not have any issues distributing chlorine on a large scale. कुछ और हो सकता है. Can you think of any other disadvantages?
Yes.
Sorry? Yes, can you be more specific? Disinfection byproducts, have you heard of this? Yes, these are very, very toxic. They are mutagenic. Okay, so whenever it comes to chlorine, we are very, very careful about the dosage you put, because yes, it might be killing all the thing, but eventually we are the ones who might be dying even before the ARBs are got. So that's a huge issue. Again, here, unfortunately, nothing much is happening to ARGs. So genes, relatively, they are unaffected. So we have an example here of a full-scale wastewater treatment plant with chlorination at about 8 to 10 milligrams per liter at 30 minutes contact time. It revealed an increase of relative abundance of intracellular and extracellular ARGs. Okay, so after this particular thing, we found that it is increased. Why? Because when you're doing the chlorination, the bugs are all getting killed. The ARBs or most of the bacteria are getting killed. When there is when their cell membrane is compromised, through those pores, from there the genes are coming out. Right? So that's the kind of thing. So good to some extent for bacteria, but not for the genes. Next, UV radiation. Here, this again is a classic disinfection technology using UV light, resulting in the damage of DNA nucleotides of pathogens. Now, UV is classically, the way it kills bacteria is that it is going to work around with the DNA. It just, deactivates them. So do you think there is some ray of hope for us now here for ARG? Might be. Let's see. So, however, bacteria carrying antibiotic resistance are also more tolerant to UV radiation than non-resistant bacteria. So you see that? So that's what I'm saying, because these are not just normal bacteria. We have made them into like a different creature itself. So those guys are capable of withstanding much more. Right? Specific proteins responsible for tetracycline resistance and all may absorb UV light and protect these guys. Okay. let's say if something happens to the genes. Now, the generally low ARB removal efficiency of UV radiation studies could also be a matter of photo reactivation as well as other factors like protection by colloids and particles in wastewater. See, if you look carefully, may also be and all that. So this is an evolving study. Okay, people started looking at the treatment of these entities only in the last a couple of years. So we're just experimenting. There might be very less pilot scale studies. So hence people are trying different combinations and trying to see what the associated values would be. Alright, so that's where we are. Some studies have reported that gram-positive bacteria are less sensitive to UV exposure than gram-negative bacteria. Now here also very limited removal of ARGs was reported at UV, dosage. Compared to the rapid inactivation of ARB, high fluences are needed to remove the ARGs. So minor destruction of intracellular ARGs than extracellular ARGs. Because extracellular means it's already out there. So what was there, maybe it has gone, but not much effect on the intra ones. Right? So we still haven't got anything in these 3 disinfection methods which can actually adequately, that's the reason ARGs are much more challenging. And we don't have an option as of now. Now, so those 3 were the classical, methods, because that's the reason I gave you an overview of the existing method. And you just have to relate and check and see how things are to kill this vis-a-vis how people are doing it for disinfection. It's just relatively the same thing. Membrane filtration here, it is classically used for, the rejection of suspended solids and total dissolved compounds during membrane treatment. And classically, we have either a low pressure membrane filtration we can have, exemplified by like microfiltration or ultrafiltration, or we could have membrane operating at high pressure like our RO and all that. Okay, reverse osmosis or a nanofiltration. If you see here, how we differentiate is, in the low pressure membrane, we see that the differentiation is primarily in their pore size. All right. So microfiltration, the pore size are 0.1 to 1 micrometer, whereas for nano, whereas for the ultra one, it is much finer. It's 0.01 to 0.1. Now here, because of the sheer size, what is the size of bacteria? How much? No, how much? This is also micrometers, no? This is 0.1 to 1 micrometer. Bacteria, what do you think? What is the size of a bacteria? All are looking at their phone. So Google now is doing the work. I can see yes. How much? Okay, have any one of you done a lab experiment in which you do filter sterilization of something by using a filter paper and then filter sterilization? Do you take any chemical and suppose there is some chemical which is heat sensitive. If you put it in the autoclave, it will degrade. So we usually go around that. A good method is to use a filter sterilization. So if you know the pore size of the filter membrane, now I'm getting answers. 0.45 is commonly used. 0.2 is even lesser. So here when I'm saying at 0.1 to 1 for microfiltration and all that, pretty much I'm trying to do a sieving mechanism. All right. And for pressure-driven filtration, the cutoff, the molecular weight cutoff comes into play. So it's 0.3 to 2 for nano filtration, and for reverse osmosis, it is even higher. Now, these are capable of removing impurities such as bacteria, viruses, and also some ions. So we might have possibilities of genes around here in the pressure-driven membranes. Now, this has demonstrated a strong dependency of ARG reduction on the pore size or molecular weight cutoff of all this membrane. So because this is so fine, so potentially membrane filtration may offer a solution for tackling the genes. Okay. Now, membrane, so from there it stems that membrane bioreactor, we have something called as membrane bioreactor. These are popular for AMR related studies. So in one of the recent papers, we have seen that one of the genes, this BLA gene, up to 1 log unit gene copies per 100 ml. So how we quantify the genes are pretty much by copy numbers. Remember, I was talking about the qPCR, etc., which are quantitative methods. Once you do a qPCR experiment, we get quantitative data. Like for real relative ones, we were not getting. We were just knowing if a gene is present or not. For qPCR, you'll be able to get, values by which we can play around with. So there was this substantial reduction in, so when you used 100 kilodalton one vis-a-vis a 10 kilodalton, you saw that there was substantial removal. So as of now, it appears that this could be a way forward. Okay. But obviously, if I just have one step membrane bioreactor, it's going to be very expensive, because if you have something like that and all the pollutants are going through it, very soon there'll be membrane fouling. Okay, membrane to manage and to maintenance of the membranes are very very tricky. So this is how a membrane bioreactor works. So you have all these components. So this is a representation of our genes and bacteria and all that. And I'm having my conventional activated sludge. And the CAS is conventional activated sludge. So here you're having the wastewater. We have anoxic and aerobic and all given, because I'm looking at removal of all set of things, even your nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, all that. Okay, so that is a different course on its own. So pretty much just imagine that this is an extended aeration, activated aeration system, all right, wherein you're getting removal. Apart from removal of carbon, there's removal of nitrogen and phosphorus also. And once it comes here, so this is what I would call as a membrane bioreactor, this diagram. So this is classical ASP, followed by I can have a unit of microfiltration or, nanofiltration or anything. So then, because the treatment is done, the nasty things are over. All right. So as a polishing step, just to handle the genes or something, it is doable. We could think of. So that is something which looks promising, but it needs to be seen how cost effective it is when it comes to implementation. So I would be giving you this, these materials. You can see on your own that, what the relative efficiencies of removal of each of these components are. Here, FC is fecal coliforms, HB are heterotrophic bacteria. See, look, we are now interested in killing the ARB. But please do not forget that heterotrophic bacteria and other bacteria are also there. So when you do a treatment step, you get kills. We are not doing, okay, good bacteria, you stay, you go. That's not it. Just like in totality, we look at the number of counts and all that. So you can get a feel of, what these promising technologies are. So those were some of the technologies. Like we had 3 under the disinfection or advanced oxidation, followed by a membrane-based techniques. Apart from that, these days, there are 2 more methods coming, very actively researched, under the head of nature-based solutions. Okay, one of this is called as constructed wetlands. Now, these are engineered ecosystems that sort of mimic the natural wetlands. Wetlands, do we have wetlands here in India? What do you mean by wetlands? Mangroves, yes, very good. Do we have any wetlands or mangroves in India? Where? Sundarbans. And why is it ecologically so important? Prevent from cyclone, anything else? From pollution? Sorry? Yes. Okay. You have so there is a whole thrust. You must be seeing there is a lot of emphasis on preserving all the mangroves and wetlands, because wetlands have a very unique habitat. It is super important from an environmental perspective also to take care of most of the pollutants and all that. So here, pretty much in a constructed wetland, we try to mimic what is happening in the nature. So what we do is, so it's like in a wetland environment, you have a mix of all these processes happening. There'll be physical removal. That means, something like physical removal, I would put all the sedimentation-based removal. Then you have chemical action, that is an activity where there is adsorption and removal of the pollutants. there's always biological processes also going on. So all these three things in totality is what we call as, trying to mimic the natural wetland habitat. Now, if you say here, this is how it looks. So pretty much here in a constructed wetland, we engineer it. It's not that you go to a natural wetland and try to do stuffs. So these are engineered systems that can help reduce both ARGs and ARBs. So there are experimental studies. Some of the lab-based studies look very promising, and they say that it could remove both in totality through a combination of a series of all these methods. So physicochemical and biological processes such as filtration, adsorption, biodegradation, photolysis, retention. And how it is done is, so you're having this plant here. Okay, I can show it better in the next picture. Yeah, in this picture here. So if you see, this is this plant, okay, growing in a wetland environment. And you're having, so this is the influent which is coming, or the inlet water which is having ARB and ARGs. So as it percolates down through this, so when I'm having a wetland system, there will be a zone of soil or sand would be there. So we'll have, distinct layers of these arranged in very nicely as a layer. So as it is going to percolate through this sand bed or a soil bed, you could have removal by filtration, which is like sort of mimicking how in a natural filter the separation happens. And also when it is here, and it is not a flowing system, and I'm saying a natural constructed wetland, you will be having, it's like you can actually mimic it and do it in the lab also. A deep tub you could take, and then you can layer this, but the bottom layers will not have a lot of soil. It will be more of aqueous. Okay, so then here it is behaving like a sedimentation tank. All right, and then you have, so this is the wastewater which is having all this. Now, throughout in the entire area, be it in the sand or in water, there would be natural microbes present everywhere. They will also do their work. So they will also try to, do the degradation and all that. Okay. So by a mix of a lot of these activities, also by adsorption, you'll see that there is removal or less, presence of. So here in a bioremediation strategy, if you were looking, so through plant, microbe and abiotic interactions, they degrade the pollutants. Okay, that means the interactions at the plant root rhizobia with that of the microbes. Similarly, here if you see the main removal mechanism dependent on substrate adsorption and microbial degradation. Okay, so some substrate means it could be an antibiotic, which is a substrate, which is being adsorbed. All right, so if there is no substrate, that means you are trying to remove the stressors itself from the environment. Okay, so it is like, I cannot ascribe it to one reason that this is the main reason. Like for membrane, it was straightforward. I said that the pore size is this, so anything bigger than this was separated. I cannot ascribe one such phenomena here. It's a multiple phenomena which is acting. Now, when I look at the nature-based solution, apart from wetland, constructed wetland, there's one more which is called as vermifiltration. Okay, this is also very promising, showing promising results. We have only a few papers as of now, and this is primarily a biofilter using earthworms and microbial communities. So it's vermifiltration means people might be thinking it's only earthworms, but it is a mix of earthworms and microbacteria would be there. This is a low-cost treatment with no chemicals and producing valuable compost. That's important. So here you get very good compost also, which can be used to agricultural system. So this compost, obviously, there won't be antibiotics and all, because these guys, they are meant to, so when I'm using this as a treatment option, they're capable of degradation of most of the ARGs and ARBs also. The treatment system that use earthworm activities as a part of the treatment, so it's a mix of three mechanisms. One is there is aeration. So when these earthworm actually keeps burrowing and wriggling around in the filter bed, there is burrowing, which prevents the clogging and promotes aerobic microorganism. So otherwise what happens is whenever you have a filter assembly, most of the times there is a risk that it might just block with all the airs and all going. So if it's a biofilter, you would definitely want that it should be well aerated, because this is a water system. Right? No, sorry, it is a soil-based system. So the micro aeration is involved. It is increased. Then there's also microbial shift. That means castings enrich beneficial microbes that outcompete the resistant bacteria. What is castings? What do I mean by castings? Yeah, the earthworm's fecal matter. Okay, so that's a good one. So we are actually relying on their fecal matter. Now that is very good quality compost that we call as castings. And then they also have a set of bacteria. Now those guys are so good and they're like the healthy ones. Right? So they can easily outcompete or others' numbers will be depleted soon. So that's what I mean by a microbial shift. So if you're having a filter bed in which there are no earthworms, or if you have a reference sample, a control sample, you check the community structure of that vis-a-vis this one, you'll see that there is a complete shift of the microbes in this case. And also the gut action, that means the earthworms digest and destroy pathogens and the resistant bacteria. So they themselves, they are like, parasites, and they themselves consume. So it's okay because we don't rely on using those earthworms for our food or dietary purposes, so then it's okay. So this is how the whole filter looks like. The influent would come from it would be like it's a downflow kind of arrangement, and there would be an earthworm zone. So pretty much most of the on the top, because they are completely relying on aeration, or they require a lot of oxygen, and here you'll have a well aerated system. Then you have a biofilm and microbial layer. Right, because this is not, this not completely indented or completely like what do you say, doped with water. So at times we would stop the flow. It will become like it'll try to absorb, and there will be more of microbial action. And then we so it is like a step action. Okay, so there will be incoming flow rate. Then we stop for a few hours, how we do for an SBR reactor and all that. Right? So here you'll see eventually, so how the kind of biofilm which we see in activated sludge plant and all that. Usually the risk is in this layer, in the biofilm layer, with time, there could be anaerobic environment. But since these guys are on the top and they are like so actively moving around and wriggling and all, oxygen requirement or depletion does not happen. So anoxic zones don't, so that does not happen, and it's good for our thing. So here, organic matter, pathogens, nutrients, all these are present for the earthworms. And as it goes down, because there is organic matter present in the wastewater itself, there's a very good microbial degradation. Right? So the bacteria, earthworms are doing their work. They're giving the oxygen, or they make sure that the environment has enough oxygen and all that. And these guys, so together, both of them, they would see that most of the things are removed. So that's why we write here, it's like a synergy between the microbial action and earthworms. Right? Effluent has reduced BOD, COD, TSS, and pathogens. So again, here, it's not specifically mentioning ARG. Okay? Because when you go into that and you do an experiment, you finally look at the total count of the pathogens. Earthworms digest the organic matter and different solids screened on the filter bed and help to degrade the pollutants via absorption occurred in the body wall through enzymatic activity. Okay? All right? And this is excellent performance in decreasing the toxicity of antibiotics. All right? So this is sort of taking care to remove that stressor from the environment. So these are pretty much the options which we have. All right. Now for us, it is mandatory for us to know which is the right tool to pick. So there are several options. There is no one rule which says that this could be the solution for all the problems or for all the kind of wastewater. You have conventional wastewater treatment plant, which is also there. That is, low amount of AMR can be removed. How? Because when you have the activated sludge, onto the sludge, some amount of antibiotics or the ARBs can sort of adsorb. Okay, it is removed from the water, but it's not a permanent solution, because that thing then becomes a hotspot. that sludge which we discussed in the first class. Then we have the advanced oxidation methods, that is ozone. I'm sorry, this is wrong. RO will not come under advanced. It will be ozone. We'll be having chlorination and what? Photocatalysis, Fentons. All this comes in the category of advanced oxidation. Constructed wetland is good. AMR removal is very high. Cost is low. Land use requirement is high, because when I'm talking about earthworm action and all, I can't just give him a small beaker and ask him to perform. So the requirement of land is high because it is like surface aeration. You cannot go deep. Okay, the earthworm layer needs to be quite shallow. So it could be implemented in areas where land is not a very, priced commodity. Vermifilter, again, moderate to high removal, cost low. Land use requirement is also less, so small communities on-site use, it can be used. So what's the way forward is, solving such crises, that is AMR-related crisis, etc. Again, I come to almost the same take-home, that it requires an integrated approach wherein, so that's again the reason why we keep coming back to the One Health concept, in which just one solution cannot be the answer. It has to be an integrated approach between multiple components. Alright. Here in this class, we were trying to remove or address the problem in the aqueous phase. But if we can simultaneously address or not have that issue at all by addressing or by better management of the soil or sludge or the manure, then we may not even have had, because it is difficult. It's not as easy as ASP, removal of organics. This is very difficult. You've seen how challenging it is. Right? So yeah, with that, we finish the today's lecture. I'm happy to take any questions if you have. Yeah.
Doing that again, time with you, I'm this with us to the RCX, so it's here in soon, I think a big line. As of the diesel actions and be actual the no. So it's not a simple absorption onto the plants. It's like a very complex multi-process dimension happening there. So there could be absorption on the plant root or it could be on the soil, because you are having soil there and the water layer. So it is percolating through sand and soil. It could be absorption onto those filter beds. It could be simple mineralization, how you have for microbial degradation, that is the ASP kind of things. It can be simple absorption. It could be filtration. So it's a mix of all those things. Then they won't go inside the plant and then get this some antibiotic state on the plant, the photosystem to the eye. Although that risk is always there. That risk was there. That risk could be there, yes. Because as I said before, when you do have fresh. So in the One Health approach, when I'm talking about animals, human beings and environment, plant is part of that environment. And when we come to that, you'll see that there is a lot of examples, or there are. It is completely defined. It's not a hypothesis anymore. That plant uptake is there. Please. Any other questions?
I can remember in that thing that we have and the states that mentioned about some removal rings also. Like in memory filtration, actually we don't store data in anything. We used to concentrate some materials we want. So on medium. So when we are seeing what find out like the it is to more and because that being in the version like the answer, we have to look for some other.
That is a very valid question, because when you're having a membrane and you're having a blockage, so you're so suppose if this is the membrane like so, all your ARBs, for the timing, let's just ignore the ARGs. Okay, all these bacteria are sort of removed here because they are much bigger in size. Now, when you're, and membrane fouling is a very common thing, and you're having actually, these are mostly heterotrophic organisms, right? The water might have some amount of organic matter involved in. They will actually, it's not just blocking them, they will proliferate as they grow us. So then cleaning of the membrane becomes
There's not one
About biofouling.
Too much right. Active question is like, for example, if you're degrading a pollutant using any other systems, like it will be getting mineralized.
Yeah.
And be focusing towards some mineralization. Like, for example, if you are using any advanced oxidation process for degrading KRC, for instance, it's very degraded. Actually, it will break down and convert to some other product.
Yeah.
But when we are using the mental compression rate,
It is just separation.
it is separate. But what is the trait of the separated stuff?
So that is like a sludge, it has to be there. So then again, it goes from the water phase you're removing. Probably you could go ahead and disinfect this. You would go for a sterilization technique or something. The way we handle, those live bacteria if it's outside, the way you handle your active sludge and activated sludge process. From a secondary clarifier, then sludge is viable cells, right? How do you handle that sludge? It goes through a sludge stabilization method. Okay.
When incinerate.
Yeah. No, incineration is usually not advisable. We usually go for stabilization by lime, or you go for aerobic or anaerobic stabilization. That has to. Otherwise, we just separate it. So, okay, students, we'll be having more questions during the tea time. We will discuss some. All right, thank you.